Emmett Hale rode home after 3 hard winters away. 3 winters spent trying to outrun a grief that no distance had ever once let him escape. And he came back fully expecting to find the ranch he'd abandoned and fallen to ruin and weeds, a fitting tomb for the life he'd fled. Instead, he topped the rise above the Mill Creek country and saw his home standing whole and tended and alive. The fences sound, the garden green, smoke curling from the chimney, and his late wife's roses still blooming along the porch rail where she had planted them with her own 2 hands. Someone had kept it. Someone had loved it back from the ruin he'd left it to. And when the door of his house opened, it was a widow who stepped out onto the porch, a woman who had loved his dead wife as dearly as he had. To understand why Emmett Hale had ridden away from his own home and stayed gone 3 winters, you have to understand what he had lost. Emmett and Rose Hale had built the ranch in the Mill Creek country together, the 2 of them, from little more than raw land and young love. They had no children, but they'd had each other, and that had been enough and more than enough. 15 good years of it. 2 people who fit together the way few people are lucky enough to. Rose had been the heart of the place. She'd planted the garden and the roses along the porch. She'd made the rough house a true home. She'd filled the land with her warmth and her laughter. And Emmett had loved her with the whole of his quiet, undemonstrative soul. And then Rose had taken a fever, 1 hard winter, and despite everything, despite the doctor, despite the neighbors, despite Emmett's frantic, helpless tending, she had died. And the bottom had dropped clean out of Emmett Hale's world. He could not bear it. That was the plain and shameful truth of it. The truth he would carry like a stone for years. He could not bear to stay in the home they had built, where every single corner held her. Her roses by the door, her dishes on the shelf, her side of the bed gone cold, her laughter still seeming to echo in rooms that would never hold it again. The ranch that had been their joy became, overnight, an unbearable monument to everything he'd lost, and Emmett, drowning in a grief he had no idea how to survive, did the only thing his shattered heart could think to do. He ran. He saddled his horse, left the ranch behind him with the door unlocked and the future unsettled, and rode away from the Mill Creek country to outrun his grief. He did not outrun it. No man ever has. He drifted north into the high country, taking work where he found it, line camps in the lonely winters, trail crews in the brief summers, hard anonymous labor among strangers who didn't know his name or his loss. 3 winters he spent that way, a hollow man moving from place to place, sleeping in bunkhouses and line shacks among men who knew nothing of who he'd been or what he was running from. And that was how he wanted it. He spoke little. He worked hard so as to be too tired at night to think. And in all that time and all those miles, the grief rode with him as faithfully as his own shadow, no lighter for any distance he put between himself and home. Some nights he'd wake in a strange bunk and reach for Rose before he remembered, and the remembering was as fresh as the first day. He had thought, in his flight, that the home was the thing causing the pain, and that to leave the home would be to leave the pain. He learned, slowly and bitterly, that the pain was inside him and went where he went, and that all his running had bought him was 3 years of lonely exile, added on top of his loss. And somewhere in the 3rd hard winter, snowed in alone in a line shack with nothing but his own thoughts for company, something in Emmett Hale finally turned. He grew tired, bone tired, soul tired, of running from a thing he was carrying inside him anyway. He began to think of the home he'd abandoned, not with unbearable pain, but with a kind of aching homesickness, a deep, quiet longing to stand again in the rooms where he and Rose had been happy, to stop running and face what he'd lost on the ground where he'd lost it. He had no illusions about what he'd find. 3 winters abandoned. The ranch would surely be a ruin. The garden gone to weeds, the house fallen in, fit for nothing but a final goodbye and perhaps a sale to clear his conscience. But he found he wanted, more than anything in the world, to go home, even to a ruin, even to weeds and a falling roof. So as the 3rd winter broke toward spring, Emmett Hale turned his horse south and rode home at last. That was the man, hollowed out, braced for ruin, ready to say goodbye, who topped the rise above the Mill Creek country and saw, instead of the wreck he'd expected, his home alive and whole and lovingly kept. and roses still blooming by the door. He sat his horse and could not understand it. And then the door opened and a woman came out, a woman of about his own age, plain and kind-faced and steady, drying her hands on her apron, and she saw him sitting there, gaunt and travel-worn, and her own face went pale, and then soft, and she said, "Emmett Hale, you've come home. Oh, thank God, she always hoped you would." Her name was Sadie Pruitt, and she had been Rose's dearest friend in all the world. She told him the whole of it, the two of them sitting on the porch among Rose's roses as the spring evening came down. Sadie was a widow herself, her own husband 2 winters in the ground, and she had a small place on the far side of Mill Creek. But long before either of them was widowed, she and Rose had been bosom friends, closer than sisters, the two of them, for the better part of 15 years. They had shared everything, the work and the worry and the laughter of 2 ranch wives in a hard country, the secrets and the joys and the long ordinary days. And when Rose had taken her fever, it was Sadie who had come and stayed and nursed her through it. Sadie who had held her friend's hand at the very end, Sadie who had grieved her loss as deeply, in her own way, as Emmett had in his. "And then you rode away," Sadie said, gently, without accusation. "I understood it, Emmett, I did. I saw what her dying did to you. A man can't always bear what he's handed, and I never once blamed you for running. But you left her home behind you, the home she built with her own hands and loved with her whole heart. And I watched it start to go. The garden going to seed, the fences sagging, her roses choking in the weeds, and I could not bear it. I could not bear to watch the home that Rose made fall to ruin. It would have been like watching her die a second time." Her eyes filled, so I started tending it, just the garden at first. I couldn't bear to walk past Rose's roses going to thorns and weeds. Then the house, to keep the damp out and the small creatures from getting in. Then the fences, and the stock that had scattered into the breaks, and the wells, and the roof when the autumn storms tore at it. 3 winters now, I've kept Rose's home alive, Emmett. Kept it just as she'd have wanted it. Kept her roses blooming along that porch rail right where she planted them. Because I loved her, and because I couldn't let the last living thing she made go to dust. Some weeks it nearly broke me. I have my own small place to run, and tending 2 was almost more than one widow could manage. And because, Sadie's voice caught, because as I hoped, all through 3 winters of work I had no business taking on. I hoped that someday you'd come home to it and find it standing and not have lost that too on top of losing her. Emmett Hale put his weathered face in his hands and wept. For Rose, and for the 3 wasted winters, and for the unbearable, undeserved grace of what he was hearing. He had run from his wife's home and abandoned it to ruin. And her dearest friend had quietly stayed and kept it alive for 3 hard years, tending the very roses Rose had planted, holding faith with a dead woman's memory and a vanished man's possible return, asking nothing, doing it all for pure love of the friend she'd lost. While he had been off running from his grief, Sadie Pruitt had been here, honoring it. "There's one thing more," Sadie said when his weeping had quieted. "And I've gone back and forth on whether to tell you, but I think she'd want you to know it." Near the end, the last clear day she had, Rose talked to me. She knew she was going, and she wasn't frightened for herself, Emmett. She was frightened for you. "He won't know how to bear it," she told me. "He'll be all alone, and he won't know how to go on." And she took my hand and she asked me, she made me promise to look after things. To look after the home she loved, if it came to that, and to look after you if ever I could. Sadie wiped her eyes. "So that's the other reason I kept this place. Not just for love of her, though that was most of it. It was a promise, the last promise I ever made her. To keep her home, and to keep watch for the day her husband might come back to it. And so Emmett Hale came home, truly home, and stayed. There was no more talk of selling, no more running. He took up the work of the ranch again, the ranch that Sadie's faithful love had preserved. And slowly, on the ground where he had been happy and where he had grieved, he began at last to heal, not by outrunning his loss as he'd tried so hard and so vainly to do, but by coming home to it and living in it, and letting the home Rose built hold him. And Sadie Pruitt was there through all of it. How could she not be? She knew the ranch now better than he did, after 3 winters of tending it. She knew where everything was and how everything ran. And more than that, she was the one person left in all the world who had loved Rose as he had. The two of them, the husband and the dearest friend, were the keepers of the same precious memory. The only two who carried Rose still living in their hearts. They would talk of her in the long evenings. Sadie telling Emmett things about his own wife he'd never known. The secrets and the laughter of 15 years of friendship. The small everyday foolishnesses Rose would never have told her own husband, but had told her dearest friend. And Emmett sharing in return the Rose only a husband knew. The quiet morning Rose, the half-asleep Rose, the Rose of 15 years of marriage. Things Sadie had never been told. They were the only two people on earth who could give each other these pieces of her, and they gave them gratefully. And in the sharing, Rose stayed alive between them, vivid and laughing in their joined memory. And the unbearable solitary weight of grieving her alone was, for each of them, eased by the other. What grew between them in time neither of them expected, and both of them at first resisted. For as the seasons turned and they worked side by side and kept Rose's memory together, Emmett and Sadie came, slowly and against all their intentions, to a deep and tender regard for one another. A warmth, a comfort, a need for each other's company that began to look very much like love. And both of them were stricken with guilt at it. To Emmett it felt like a betrayal of Rose, to find himself caring for another woman in the very home he'd shared with his wife. To Sadie it felt worse. To love the husband of her dearest friend felt like the deepest treachery imaginable, and she was tormented by it. For a time the two of them held painfully apart, each ashamed of a feeling that seemed to dishonor the woman they both had loved. It was Sadie, in the end, who found the way through, because she alone held the thing that could free them both. "Emmett," she said one evening, her voice trembling, "I have to say a thing, and I'm afraid to say it, and I'll only say it once. I believe, that we have come to care for each other, and I know that shames us both because of her. I've lain awake with the shame of it, but I keep coming back to that last day and the promise she asked of me. Look after him," she said, "if ever you can, Emmett." I don't think she meant only the fences and the roof. I knew Rose better than anyone alive but you. She had the most loving heart that ever beat. And I have come to believe, with all my own heart, that what she wanted, what she would want, if she could see us now, was not for the two people she loved most in this world to live out their whole lives alone in their grief for her. I think she'd want us to be a comfort to each other. I think she'd want us happy. I think, Emmett, that she gave us to each other in that promise, as her last gift, and that loving each other isn't betraying her, it's honoring her. It's the very thing she hoped for. And Emmett Hale, hearing it, knew in his bones that it was true. He had known Rose's loving heart better than anyone, and he could hear her in every word of it. Could almost see her smiling at the two stubborn, grieving fools she'd left behind, willing them to stop punishing themselves and find their way to each other. The guilt did not vanish all at once, for guilt never does, but it lifted, and in its place came a kind of peace and the freedom to love. Emmett Hale and Sadie Pruitt married the following spring. Beneath the roses that Rose had planted and Sadie had kept alive, the husband and the dearest friend of the woman they both had loved and would always love, joined now in the home she'd made, with her blessing woven through every part of it. It was not a love that replaced the love they'd lost. It was a different love, gentler and graver, grown in the soil of shared grief and watered by their long love for the same good woman, and it honored Rose rather than eclipsing her. They kept her roses always, they spoke her name freely all their lives, and they built, in the home she'd built, a good and tender life that they were both quite certain, looked down upon and smiled to see. Folks in the Mill Creek country told the story for years, and it was a favorite among them because it was so full of faithfulness. Emmett Hale ran when his Rose died, the old-timers would say. Couldn't bear the home without her in it, so he saddled up and rode off, and stayed gone 3 hard winters, trying to outrun a grief that no man can outrun. Left her ranch behind to fall to ruin. And here they'd smile, but it didn't fall to ruin, because Sadie Pruitt, Rose's dearest friend, who'd nursed her at the end and grieved her like a sister, and who'd promised the dying woman she'd look after things, Sadie kept that ranch alive the whole 3 winters he was gone. Kept the house, the land, even Rose's roses, all out of love for her lost friend, hoping all the while the husband would come home to it someday, and then they'd say the truest thing of it. He went looking for a way to escape his grief, and there isn't one. You carry it wherever you run. The only way through grief is home, and through, not away. And when he finally came home, he found that love had kept the door open for him the whole time. His wife's love, living on in the faithful hands of her dearest friend. Rose loved them both too well to want either of them alone, so she left them to each other, and the two who loved her most honored her best, in the end by loving each other and living on in the home she made. That's not forgetting the dead, that's the truest way there is of keeping them.